welcome Ernest Miguelez to this City-REDI seminar series. Today, Ernest is going to present a paper on global mobile inventors. This is about an analysis of different mobility of inventors, but also looking at the patent activity. Ernest Miguelez did a PhD in Barcelona with Rosina Moreno, we share former PhD supervisors, and Francesco Lisoni. But he is a research fellow at the French National Center for Research. Is at the Bordeaux School of Economics at the University of Bordeaux. The research interest covers economic geography, innovation economics, migration, and intellectual property. And he is a quantitative researcher that has worked with big data sets on patent inventors and scientific publications. He has published his research in different academic journals, such as the Journal of Economic Geography, Research Policy, Regional Studies, or the Journal of International Business Studies, among others. So, Ernest, the floor is yours. We normally have around 35-40 minutes presentation. Take your time, and then we will open for questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Do interrupt me if I'm going too slow or if I'm running out of time, because it might be. First of all, thanks Raquel, thanks Caroline, and for the invitation to present this work. This is a joint project with Dani Bahar from Brown University, Ras Choudhury from Harvard Business School, and Sara Signorelli from the University of Amsterdam, who I think is also among the audience. And basically, in here we work, or we look at the mobility of inventors, but in this case we are interested in the geographical mobility of inventors, the cross-country mobility of inventors, and how this affects diffusion of knowledge. This is a topic I've worked for many years, but I think that this is the angle we are giving in this paper is interesting. Let me, if I can. So let me start with some anecdotal evidence. This is Samuel Slater. He was born in Belver in 1768. If I'm not wrong, when I check in Google Maps, Belver is like very close from Birmingham, like 50 miles north. So he was born there. He started working at the age of 10 at the textile factory. In those years, the US was the biggest exporter of cotton, but they didn't possess the technology to treat it. On the other hand, the UK had this technology, and they were aware of their superiority in technological terms. And what they did is they banned the textile craftsmen to move to the United States. Slater couldn't resist the temptation from American entrepreneurs. So at some point, when at the age of 21, 1789, he memorized, because he couldn't bring any paper with him. He memorized the machineries of the factories and went to the United States and partnered there with entrepreneurs and industrialists to start a new business. Actually, if I'm not wrong, and don't know how common is this in the UK nowadays, but in the UK was known as Slater the Traitor. And there is even a memory tool. Don't ask me what are my sources about that. It was like internet, I found it like randomly, saying something like sneaky Samuel Slater snook out and installed spinning machine secrets. Like, I guess that it's to practice the S or something like that. I don't know. But apparently he's known as Slater the Traitor in the United States, in the UK, but is the father of the American Industrial Revolution in the US, because he brought, again, the textile technology. He adapted to the local needs. He partnered with local to adapt this technology to the local needs. After 6 years, he had his brother, again, memorizing other technologies in the UK. So after 6 years, he brought his brother with him. And interestingly, his wife, Hannah, was born in the United States. is the first recorded American woman inventor at the USPTO with a patent in 1793. Actually, the economic historians have been very well aware of the importance of the mobility of people for the diffusion of knowledge, catching up, and technological catching up, and so on and so forth. Some examples is the several studies of the itinerant craftsmen in early modern Europe, for instance, particularly in Italian city-states that were given like economic monopoly, sort of intellectual property right, to attract them to those cities and to develop their knowledge there, and develop their crafts there. In their case, they were bringing their people with them, even their families, and there was a very little spillover to the local economy. Other examples, historical examples, are the expulsion of the Huguenots in the 17th century in France. In this paper by Hornung, he studies how this affected the development of Prussian cities even after 100 years of their arrival. Very well-known examples of the flight of the Soviet scientists in certain academic fields, in certain scientific fields, for instance, mathematics after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Episodes of mass migration to the United States that has been studied from the perspective of innovation too, or the very well-known case of the Jews that flew the Nazi Germany in the 30s, and essentially they revolutionized the US science, in particular in chemistry. Evidence of knowledge diffusion to locals has been found because of the increasing patenting of natives in the fields or in the technological fields of these immigrants. Of course, this is today still an important issue, among other things, because the migration has been increasing incessantly over the years. This, despite the financial crisis in 2008, the COVID crisis in the last 2 years, and despite or even more because of the different wars we have seen around, including the current one. What have also changed during these recent decades is the composition of these migrants, being the high skill more and more preponderant over the low skill. So over the years, and particularly towards certain OECD countries, high-skilled workers has been dominating the flows of migrants, and among them a big chunk of engineers, scientists, and so on. You can, for instance, look at the different countries and using different patent data, the share of inventors who are of foreign origin. And if you want, we can discuss about how this is measured later on. In many countries, the share of patents produced by inventors with a foreign origin has been increasing, particularly in all the Anglo-Saxon countries, also some in continental Europe, and of course, way less in Asian countries. Let me reiterate a bit more this anecdotal evidence to show you, or to show you what we are trying to do. This is Ismael Mena, who is a Chilean scientist and inventor, who was the pioneer in patenting in the technology A61B. Essentially, technologies are in patent jargon as if they were scientific fields. Okay, so he was the first contributing in Chile in this technological field, A61B, in 1996, which is some sort of medical instrument or something like that. After his first patent, 17 more patents were patented by Chilean inventors in Chile in that same technology, none of them by Ismael Mena. What we ask ourselves is, how did Ismael Mena know about this technology if in Chile there wasn't any person to learn from? Well, we can look at the patent itself, which was filed in 1996 at the USPTO, where Ismael Mena is listed here with the address of Santiago de Chile in Chile. This patent is so he teamed up with a list of inventors, so the Deagle's family plus this other inventor, who were located in California. So this was clearly what Sari Pekala and Bill Kerr have coined as the global collaborative pattern, meaning a pattern made up of teams, of a team where the inventors are located in different countries, and therefore maybe he learned about this technology through the network. Interestingly, however, we also find 2 years ago in 1994, Ismael Mena patenting in California with his team. So actually, before moving to Santiago de Chile, he was patenting in California in that same technology. So he was a global mobile inventor. He was an inventor that moved across borders, and somehow he transferred the technology to another country where that technology was not didn't exist, and after him settling there, the technology developed. So this is what we want to study here, this idea of global mobile inventors, and we are going to look at these GMIs for short, and whether these GMIs are different from the rest of inventors. And we are going to ask ourselves the main question is the following: whether we can trace back the origin of a country inventive activity in a specific technological field to the migrant inventor bringing key technological assets from abroad, like the case of Samuel Slater in the 18th century. That's why I referred to this anecdotal evidence before. And we want to see what we can learn about these GMIs and how they diffuse knowledge and so on and so forth. Be aware that this is still a work in progress. And for instance, it's quite descriptive in the sense that we try to do our best in the little econometrics we have, but there's no fancy identification strategy and nothing like that. Of course, ideas are very welcome. A summary of our findings is that GMIs are essentially different from the rest of inventors in the sense that they have longer careers, patent more, they produce higher quality patents and so on and so forth. We do find that GMIs are significantly more present in the first stages of the development of a new technological class, and I will come back to this later on. And we find that their importance in the life cycle of a technology concentrates at the beginning, and their presence disappears, which means that the technology ends up being embedded in the local inventors. About the literatures to which we contribute, there are several. To start with, all this literature that comes from economics, but also economic geography or international business, on how the knowledge is more and more global, how multinational corporations orchestrate their knowledge production, tapping into talent and into clusters or into partners from everywhere in the world, and so on and so forth. There is a bunch of literature to which we have also contributed ourselves, looking at how what is the role of movers or migrants in this in this organization of knowledge production worldwide. So we aim to contribute to this literature with these ideas of the GMIs, of the global mobile inventors. Of course, part of the background is the migration, diffusion, innovation literature, which essentially have looked, for instance, at whether the diasporas contribute to their home country technological development by sending knowledge back home, in this case measured through patent citations. There has been some papers that have indeed, as I mentioned at the beginning, looked at whether immigrants also improved the productivity of natives where they go, which has been interpreted as a sort of knowledge diffusion, knowledge spillover to locals. But in general, all this literature is either only centered in the US case or too much aggregated. Some of it, as including ourselves, have used citations, patent citations as a proxy for knowledge flows, although this has been quite criticized recently. And all these historical studies are very, very interesting, but the migration flows have changed notably in the last decades. In those historical events, the migration flow were in the direction of the more developed country to the less developed country, at least in terms of scientific advancement or technological advancement, right? From the Germany in the 30s in the field of chemistry to the US, which was less developed in those fields, and therefore there were room for knowledge diffusion to those countries. On the contrary, nowadays the mobility or the migration of highly skilled workers is usually towards the knowledge frontier, so towards the United States and similar countries, and therefore it has to be seen whether there are opportunities or also for knowledge diffusion. So what the data we're going to use comes from this resource called PatentsView, which essentially is a resource put forward by the Office of the Chief Economist of the USPTO, where all the information of the USPTO patents, including all the application citations and all the information, is put together in a website and in tables and in a very friendly way. Essentially, the value added of this data set is that they apply kind of complex algorithms to disambiguate inventors and assignees. In short, the idea is to, as I showed you before, the front pages of two patent applications. You had there Ismail Mena in the two patents, but you really don't know whether these Ismail Mena are the same Ismail Mena, the same person, or they are two different persons with the same name. So resolving all these issues, it's usually done in the literature with a sort of more or less complex algorithms. And they do this for inventors, but they do this also for firms for which these inventors work, firms or other organizations such as universities. So it's very useful resource to do what we want to do, because it allows us to track those inventors that, despite having the same name, they change the country, and we can know whether they are the same person or not, right? Whether John Smith is the same John Smith or they are different John Smiths. In our application, we limit ourselves to using data from 1970 to 2015. We locate our patents and our inventors in time according to the priority of the application. It means that the date of the year we use is not the year of the application, or not necessarily the year of the application of the patent, but the earliest year of that patent anywhere in the world. So it's closer to where the invention was produced. We work with around 7.5 million granted patents and around 3.5 million different inventors. As I said before, we look at technological subclasses, and which are a sort of fields. The equivalent in science would be scientific fields. And the classification we use, which is the typical one in this kind of studies, include more than 600 different subclasses. Okay, this comes from when a patent. I'm not sure if I'm explaining obvious things or not, but just in case, when a patent is received in an IP office, the examiners, among other things, they assign the patent depending on the technology they are receiving. They assign it to a classification, as I said before, a classification which resembles the scientific classification, right? As if it were the GEL codes, okay? And these are codes of around 10, 12 digits. But of course, if you shorten the digits, you have a broader classification, and you can classify the patents. You can group them in fields. So this is what we do, and this is what we exploit. So this is the number of patents that are applied, that are filed at the USPTO every year. That has been, of course, increasing over the years, and more the patenting not only comes from the United States, but comes also from many other countries in the world, and many other countries and cities they're in. As expected, the US is the country contributing the more to the production of patents at the USPTO, which is the resource we use. But other countries also follow, like Japan, and some other countries, like particularly Asian countries, in the last 20 years have increased their contribution considerably. So how we define the GMI? The GMI is an inventor who patents essentially in more than one country. Most of them, or share of them, can be called migrants, although maybe not all of them. And I'll come back to this in a second. One critical issue is for how long the GMI is defined as GMI, right? Because if I move from one country to another country, I can be considered a mobile inventor for a while, but maybe after a while I don't move anymore. So these are some definitions we take from the very beginning. In our baseline exercise, we define a GMI from the moment he or she files the first patent in the new country, and during 1 year, like literally 365 days. Whatever he produces within this time window of 365 days, we define as produced by a GMI. We have other definitions, like considering a GMI only for the first patent he or she produces after moving, or defining the GMI always. If you move once, you will be defining the GMI during your whole career, regardless of whether you move more or less. A further definition is to say, listen, we look at GMI, so those that move, but we want to see whether these GMIs have experience in their country of origin, in the same technology, where their patent in their country of destination. As I said at the beginning, we want to see at the role of GMIs on the diffusion of knowledge. So we really want to know what they were doing in their country of origin, and what they were doing or what they do in their country of destination. So aside from the definition of GMI, we do a further definition, which is the GMI with previous experience in their country of origin. Let me show this in a graph. So imagine a GMI who is patenting in period 1 in the country A. Eventually, in period 3, she will move to country, before period 3, she will move to country B. And there we have like 3 different ways to define her as a GMI, or to label her as a GMI. First of all, in the first patent she produces, so that would be only for once. Second of all, for 1 year after and including the first patent she produces. And third of all, during her whole career. These are the number of movements produced by the GMIs that we see in our data. So for every year, how many movements we compute. Not all of them will be used in the final regressions, again, because remember that we want that the guy has experience in the country of origin in the same technology as in the country of destination. But an interesting thing we see in this, of course, aside from the fact that the numbers are growing year by year, but another interesting fact is that the share of movements that we identify as being within the same, within the boundaries of the multinational has been also increasing. And unfortunately, possibly we're underestimating this share because possibly there are some mistakes in the disambiguation of the firm, so it is not clear whether some of the movements are within the same multinational or not. But still, the share is not. So what I want to say is that the phenomenon of within firm mobility is also there. This is a nice visualization of the most numerous corridors. Of course, the biggest ones are those finalizing in the US, but also several of them starting in the US. So there is in and out flows among several countries. US, China being in this period the leading one. Actually, one interesting thing to do is to rank the top 10 corridors in different time windows. And here we see several things. First is that at the early years, aside from the United States, the other Western economies were always there. So the majority of the movements occur among Western economies. The second is that Asian countries like Taiwan, Korea, or China has been moving up in these rankings and now are either leading or being in top positions. The third interesting thing is that, for instance, in the last two time windows, the largest flow is from the United States to China. And the second largest flow is from China to the United States. Of course, this is as I said at the beginning, I mean, maybe many of them are not necessarily like migrants or Chinese origin inventors going to the United States and US origin inventors going to China, but possibly the immigrants and returnees are mixed up here. So what we do, our data doesn't allow to at first sight to differentiate them, but we try to do some name analysis, which is something we've done in previous papers, but it's an idea, at least in economics of innovation, that Bill Kerr and Ajay Agrawal in another paper they pioneered, using their names to understand or try to split those that are migrants against those that are returnees, or those that are immigrants against those that are returnees. So we rely on this sort of a dictionary of names, full names, which each of the name and surname is associated to a list of potential countries of origin with an associated probability and frequency. Let me show you what we do. So from a given name and surname, like in this case, Laroya Rajib or Rajib Laroya, we put through this the IBM GNR system, and the system returns a list of countries of association for the name and a list of countries of association for the surname, plus some indications of how frequent is, for instance, Rajib in India is very frequent, and it is in the top of the distribution in India. It's very frequent. So we use the information and we do sort of the following. For instance, we see Wei Rao going from China, first patenting in China in 2014, then 2015, and then in 2017 in the United States, we say, okay, this guy has a very frequent name and surname in China and very infrequent in the United States, therefore he is an immigrant. On the contrary, Marco Paniello, these are all real cases. Marco Paniello was patenting in the UK in 2013, and we see him patenting again in 2015 in Italy. Marco Paniello is not a common neither name nor surname in the UK, but it's very common in Italy. Therefore, we label him as returnee. Of course, there are things that are not as easy as these ones. For instance, the flows from the US to Canada, because they share the same linguistic roots, and therefore what we do is that, okay, this guy will be considered national of the first country where he patented. In this case, Richard Innsbrucker, his surname is common in the US and it's common in Canada, so we consider him to be national of the US wherever he moves afterwards, because these two countries share linguistic roots. Peter Wagner, he moved from Germany to Canada and then to the United States. Not all of them share linguistic roots, but either Peter or Wagner are equally very common in all of these countries. So in front of the impossibility to know whether he is an immigrant or returnee, again, we adopt the heuristic to say, okay, he will be national of the first country where he appears, an immigrant in all the other countries. Of course, this comes with some caveats in the sense that, for instance, if you look at the third column, at the last column, sorry, the third flow is still the US-Canada. It is very difficult to say whether they are migrants or returnees, or what happens a lot in Canada has a way easier way to get residency, and there might be inventors from elsewhere in the world, from Indian origin or from Chinese origin, that move between Canada and the United States. But this allows us at least to clean out our flows. And now we see that, for instance, if you look at the last column, that the most common corridors are from certain Asian countries to the United States, which is what you expected. And these are the most common immigrant corridors. But when you look at the returnee corridors, the most common are those leaving the United States to come back to their countries of origin. It's not perfect, but at least is an improvement. So let me continue with describing a bit this phenomenon. So these are the share of patents. If you look at the green line, these are the share of patents that are what is called in the literature global collaborative patents, meaning that the team is made up of inventors residing at least in 2 different countries, right? And this has received a lot of attention on whether they are sources of knowledge diffusion and so on and so forth. But actually, the share of patents that having GMIs, be it in that first patent, the inventor is a GMI because he or she just arrived to the country, or because he or she arrived some time ago, but he moved, the share of patents produced by these people is as important as the GCPs, or even more important, depending on the definition. So of course, looking at this, we feel that is important. The first thing we do is that we compare our GMIs, in this case defined as, for simplicity, because it was easier to compare them. If a GMI moves once, we define him or her as GMI in her whole career. If you compare them to the rest of the inventors, clearly we do 2 things. We compare them to the rest of the inventor, and we compare them to which is the 4th column, to the rest of the inventors with at least 2 patents, which is, I mean, having already 1 patent, becoming an inventor is tough. Having 2 is really a big threshold. So to be fair, it is important to compare inventors with at least 2 patents, because GMI by definition have 2 patents. So if you compare them with the inventors with at least 2 patents, so the first and 4th column, we can see that the GMIs are systematically more productive. Of course, by definition, they are they've been in more than 1 country. They work for more different number of assignees, more likely to be present in big firms. They are active during more years, even bigger average size of the teams. They rely more on scientific fields, as you can infer that from the number of MPL citations. And they are more prevalent in fields around electrical engineering, which means ICT, telecommunications, and so on and so forth, and chemistry, including biotechnology, fine chemistry, pharma, and all the stuff. So they are more prevalent there as compared to the rest of the inventors. the other exercise we do to see what is their importance is the following. So we run these regressions in where the dependent variable is a dummy indicating whether a given inventor that appears in a given pattern is a GMI or not, a GMI with previous experience, okay? Whether the guy is a recent mover and he or she has experience in that same technology in the country where he was patenting. And in the right-hand side of the equation, we introduce 10 dummies, well, actually 9 dummies, because the reference will be the 10th one, indicating whether this particular pattern is in the first decile, the second decile, and so on, so forth, of the distribution of patents of a given technology of a given country. So what we do is that, for instance, we take the technology, coming back to Ismael Mena at the beginning, technology in Chile, A61B, which is medical instruments and so on and so forth. We sort all the patents in Chile of that same technology, and we assign each of the patent to a given decile, right? If they, according to the date of application. So the dummy first decile will be 1 if that pattern is in the first decile of the distribution over time, and so on and so forth. So we run this regression, and the results are essentially this one. So these are the coefficients of the 9 dummies. Essentially, what it's telling this is that the probability of a GI being in the first decile of the distribution of a given technology in a given country is higher than in the rest of the deciles. And actually, it is only significant for the first and the second, and so for the third. So the significance goes down, right? So their presence is not that important in the late deciles of the distribution of that technology of a given country. So they are more prevalent at the early stages of a technology in a given country. They're more prevalent at the early development of that technology in a given country. Yeah, this is the results, which are quite robust. This like shape of the coefficient is quite robust to a restricted set of fixed effects, a different definition GMI, and so on and so forth. One interesting thing, or one question you may have, is like, listen, these guys are as you said at the beginning, as your data show, they are superstars. So they go around 13 technologies because they are super clever. One exercise, a sort of counterfactual exercise we do, is that we are going to look at the GMIs, but without previous experience. And we actually don't see these, so they are not prevalent in the early stages of a technology. Of course, because possibly if they have experience, in this case, if they have experience in another technology, right? Another thing we do is that, okay, let's look at these same guys, but only after 360 days of their last move. Because you may say, listen, these guys, again, these guys are smart. They brought the technology, but they don't move anymore, but they keep patenting and being responsible for the takeoff and the emergence of technologies, regardless of the mobility. But we see here that except for the very late deciles, they are kind of equally prevalent in all the deciles, meaning that they are responsible because they patent a lot. They are responsible for a lot of patenting, but irrespective of the patent being at the early stages of that technology in a given country or in the middle of the distribution, right? We don't see the very steep decline we saw in the first graph. Of course, this is a bit cumbersome to let's say to transmit the message because of the econometrics, because we let's say that we are sort of exchanging what should be the dependent and independent variable, because what we want to understand is whether being a GMI affects the livelihood of a technology takeoff, right? So the GMI variable should be in the right-hand side of the equation, not in the left-hand side of the equation. So we put the GMI here in the right-hand side of the equation, and the dependent variable now is going to be a dummy indicating whether that particular pattern that the GMI is producing is at the early stages of the technology or not, whether it is in the first decile or not. This allows us to put a number of controls, which is very, aside from a number of fixed effects, including fixed effects for firm, but also characteristics of the pattern, characteristics of the inventor, and so on and so forth. Essentially, we do find this effect. We find that being a GMI increases the likelihood, being a GMI with previous experience increases the likelihood of the pattern you produce to be in the first decile of the technology life cycle compared to the rest of the life cycle. Again, if you put the same dummy, but with GMIs without experience or with experience, let's say in other technology, the coefficient is not significantly different from 0, which indicates that what they really matter because they transfer technology, because they diffuse technology, not because they are smarter or more gifted. We see, interestingly, when we are able to see whether the move is within the boundaries of the assignee, same firm, or across firms, and we see that the effect is quite the same, but we do find a stronger effect, and this is important, when the flow of the movers is a returnee, is what we define using name analysis. So in both cases, the coefficient is significant, but the coefficient is stronger when it is associated to returnees. So again, the results is essentially that from what we did is that we find that they are more important in the early stages of a technology development in a country. We do our best to control for whatever we can, but of course we don't have at least yet any fancy identification strategy. Something that I didn't show here, but they are more important when the receiving country is a middle or middle income country, which accords with this finding that the returnee flows have a more stronger effect, although immigrant flows have a stronger some effects too. Of course, if you believe the way we split immigrants and returnees, which is by name analysis. Yeah, this is what I said. We did several robustness checks, because in this paper we consider, I'm not sure if you are aware, but we consider only that a patent belongs to one single technology, which is the first one, which is called as like labeled the main technology, but there are other technologies. If we exploit the whole list of technologies, the results hold. We did some exercise, although I didn't show that instead of looking at the life cycle of a given technologies, we look at pairs of technologies, right? Following this idea of that technologies recombine in, right? The ideas come because of the recombination of other ideas. So we try to do this setting, but the results are kind of the same. So yeah, these are my main conclusions. Of course, aside from trying to be as strict as possible in terms of identification and so on and so forth, we would like to extend this in a number of ways. For instance, whether we want to understand how this knowledge diffusion is done, whether it's, for instance, when they arrive, with their expertise, whether they recombine their expertise with their expertise with the locals. This is something we would like to do. There are a lot of potentialities of this approach, let's say, because we did with countries, but this is something you can also do with regions, because a lot of mobility also occurs within countries and across regions and across cities. And I am sure that there is also plenty of opportunities to look at that. So I think that's all. I don't know if there's some clarification questions or some suggestions? Can I stop sharing so I can see your faces? Okay.
Thank you very much, Ernest. Very interesting. Some people had to leave, so they have sent me private messages saying, I'm sorry, I have to leave. This looks very interesting, but I will have a look at the recording afterwards. So yeah, so now if anyone has any question or any comment that wants to raise, please do join the conversation.
Hello, may I ask a question, please?
Yeah, of course.
Hello, Ernest, as always, very interesting. This is Bashir. So I wanted to ask you first, the decile is, or the country technology, is it also based on its inventors' patents or its applicants' patents?
It's based on inventors. It's based on inventors. So the attribution of a given patent to a country is based entirely on inventors. And of course, if the patent is produced in more than one country, we double count in a sense because we don't care. It's knowledge, and we don't care if it's split. We do our best to try to, and I don't know if it goes in this direction, to clear out the effect from the effect of the firm or the multinational diffusing the knowledge. We had a significant time fixed effects, I think. And in other regressions, we also had like, we sort of, not in those that I show, but in other regressions, we also had, we built a dummy in the same spirit as the GMI, but using the information from the applicant. So if the applicant in a given patent had previous experience in that technology abroad, we also had the dummy to make sure that the diffusion was not because of the multinational, but because of the GMI. Actually, if I remember well, that dummy had also a very strong effect in terms of significance, but didn't affect ours. So,
but imagine, yeah, it's pretty standard. It's actually very clear. But for me, I had actually something in mind. I might even suggest, I don't know, for you to consider it if you think it's a good idea. So imagine that you are an Apple headquarter. You move your manufacturing to China, and then you basically most of your invention go and happen there in-house, of course, in China. But your inventors are still working for an American company. So what I was thinking when you show also the reverse regression is that what if, I don't know if it's possible or plausible, what if we say the country technology based on the applicants, and so we see the impact of the GMI on the country technology. You see what I mean? So based on the applicants, whether the applicants is from the States or whether because if you see in the 80s, like the relationship between US and China was not that high in terms of fusion. And then at the end, like last decade, it was much higher. Do you think it's possible, or do you think it's a good idea?
I mean, it's definitely possible. And it's something we could try. I prefer to do it as we do it now, because with patent data, there is a lot of things that you don't really know what's going on, right? But when it comes to the country of the applicant or the firm, is even more complicated, because there is all this tax haven that may distort the pictures, or a lot of patenting being registered at the headquarters, and the headquarters magically being always in the Netherlands or in Switzerland, so this is not straightforward. When we built this dummy I was mentioning before, in that case we collapse together the potential sources of knowledge of the multinational using both inventor address and applicant address, right? So when we build the dummy for multinational experience, we look at the experience of that firm in previous countries according to the address of the inventors its patents or according to the address of the firm itself. So to make sure that what you are saying, that the knowledge didn't come from anywhere, this is the best we can do. But still, I think that the technological development or the way we build the baseline, I think it's wiser to do it with inventor addresses. Of course, we can try with like as a robustness with applicants, and hopefully the results won't change much. But just in case, because of this issue of the applicant's address that are always a bit more messy.
Yeah,
thanks for the suggestion.
No, it's just it's more of curiosity. It's whether that this inventor still contributing to the same company but is in different location. Just either way, it's going to be spillover for sure. But yeah, thank you for the clarification and good luck. It's a very good paper. I really liked it.
Thanks, Bashir.
Any more questions? No? I was curious about why you use only 1 year, and if you have chosen any I don't know, sensitivity on that using more than 1 year. Or...
Well, the sensitivity we did is that when we started the project, it was like the first patent only, right? So
very strict.
Strict and at the same time a bit not much realistic, in the sense that once you are there, you hope that we think that there can be more spillovers. We could use other time frames, or even we could like we could try to see whether the effect diminishes or when exactly the effect goes down, right? Whether it's 1 year or more or less. We also tried in the past with like when you are a GMI, you are always GMI with experience, but this was not realistic either, because as I said at the beginning, maybe after 20 years that you are not a mover, so it is not realistic that you are with the dummy one, right? Because
that status,
yes,
yes.
you are not doing anything of that anymore. The year is completely arbitrary. It's like a arbitrary time window of 365 days. But indeed, we could let's say around 1 year we could try other things, definitely.
My feeling is that there is a lot of sorting, isn't it, on the people who are moving and where they going. So I can understand very well those kind of links between US and China and China and US, because somehow the way that those countries attract scientists is very different from the way that other countries attract scientists. No? So I thought it was interesting to see a bit more about the sorting, but I also was one comment you made about the value of the patents. There is quite a lot of literature on how to give value to a patent, isn't it? Browning Hall has written quite a lot about. When you were talking about that GMIs seem to have more valued patents, or the patents that they produce, they seem to be more valued than other patents. What are you? How do you measure that?
The way we did it here is that we count, let's say, the forward citations they receive, right? So, and this is very typical in economics of innovation. If you look at the forward citations they receive for instance, in a given time window after the application, and according to the number of forward citations, the patent is at the top 5 or top 10 of the distribution, you say, okay, this is a very high valuable patent. Or you things like that, or you average the number of patents, the citations it received. Pretty much like it's a sort of a age index of among scientists, right? This is not perfect at all, and then there are other measures, and even there is a paper in where for the USPTO they have to the authors try to link it to like more economic data and see like the financial impact of a given patent. But in the end, they found that these authors particularly find that their measure of value, like economic value, is highly correlated with forward citation. So
okay.
It's not perfect, but some exercise we tried was to see whether there were differences in all our exercises of GMIs, whether they were more prone to introduce not only new technologies, but new technologies that end up being more cited, something like that. But the exercise there is not 100% clear what is telling us, so we're not sure to what is this telling us. But we also aim to say something about not only the life cycle of a technology, but also the impact of that technology in terms of citations or thanks.
Thank you very much. Any more questions?
I have a kind of question. I thank you for the very interesting talk. I know I missed something, so and it is about how do you measure early stage, and this is of the early stage. I think it could be quite difficult to measure. So I was wondering whether you have tried different kind of definition, or how many technologies can be defined to be in this stage. And then a question like, do we have something similar on the European patents? So this disambiguation, an already available database and things like that. Thank you.
So concerning the life cycle, so not sure if I'm going to answer, okay, but what we did, and this is something I always have problems to explain myself in this regard, but essentially
sorry about that.
Well, essentially whatever patents produced in a given country, in a given technology, we sort them chronologically by the year of priority, right? And as we saw at the beginning, the first patent produced in technological field A61B in Chile was that one I showed you at the beginning, produced by Ismael Mena. That was the first one, right? So we have 17 or we have 1,000 patents produced in a given technology in a given country. We sort them chronologically and we divide by 10 deciles. And we said, okay, if a patent is in the first decile, let's say,
okay, I got it now. Sorry.
Early stage. It's not about the maturity of a technology and things like that. That I know that there's other papers that have looked at that, right? But it's not about that. It's simply chronologically in a given country, a given technology, when it appears and who brings that technology. The second question was about Europe. Yeah, so many years ago, there was an attempt of doing that lasted some years, as you know, by Bocconi University, by Gianluca Tarasconi and colleagues who did this ambiguation. They stopped doing that, so not anymore. We just did it again with Gianluca for a job we are doing for the EPO regarding the women inventorship in EPO patents. So it is something that will be released by the end of the year, I guess. So one of the things that will be releasing is that disambiguation for EPO. So one thing that I've been thinking these days also was why, at least as a robustness check, we can try to do exactly the same using the EPO. The difference in the EPO is that you don't have, so in the USPTO, you have a main technological class and subsidiary technological classes. And this facilitates your job in the sense that you assign one patent to a unique technology, right? At the EPO, you have a list of technologies and not necessarily the first one is the main one. So sometimes they are simply sorted alphabetically. And still you can do it because we did it also for the USPTO, we exploit the full list and that's fine. But yeah, so this is something we could do and for robustness, and we could do, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'm conscious about the time. So just to say a very big thanks to Ernest. It was a very, very interesting paper. I think that if any of you have any questions, you just please reach out to him, please, or reach out to us, and then we just pass on to him. And again, thank you very much to all the people asking questions and attending the seminar. Thank you very much to Liz and also Caroline to help me to organize this seminar today.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye today.
Bye.
Bye.